Rule number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. I love that one as the first one because when I first started doing stand-up, I used to see a lot of guys hunched over the mic.
Yeah.
Really bad posture, well-known comics. And I always remember thinking, you got to stand up straight.
Yeah, well, you've got good posture. Just now.
I guess something happened. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. So you know, my wife is a massage therapist, and she's very physiologically aware, and so she's also helped me with this sort of thing. But we watch people on the streets all the time, and people in general now have very poor posture. And It's very bad for them.
Well, that's got to be phone related too, right? We're all
well, yeah, I
all
think
the time.
that's part of it, but I also think it's something our culture doesn't attend to. Like, you kind of have to remind your kids to stand up. You know, it takes a certain amount of conscious effort. But yeah, in that chapter, I talk a lot about lobsters, which I kind of have an affinity for lobsters, and because they, well, the short story is that when a lobster loses a fight, because they're fighting all the time for dominance, let's say, in their hierarchies, he kind of crunches down, so he looks smaller. When he wins a fight, he stretches out, looks bigger, and so he's signaling to other lobsters the tally of his victories, let's say. So if a lobster has won a fight, he's more likely to win the next fight than you would calculate from having a tally of all his previous defeats and victories. And if he loses a fight, then he's more likely to lose the next fight. So that's that Matthew principle at work. Okay, so you think, well, so what? So what does that have to do with anything? It's like, okay, here, part of the kicker is, well, the lobster runs on serotonin, neurochemical. And if the lobster loses, the serotonin levels go down, and if he wins, the serotonin levels go up. And when the serotonin levels go up, he stretches out, and he's a confident lobster. And one of the consequences of that is if a lobster loses a battle and you give him the equivalent of antidepressants, then he stretches out and he'll go fight again. So antidepressants work on lobsters. Right. And you think, well, who cares? It's like, no, you don't get it. We diverged from lobsters from an evolutionary perspective 350 million years ago, and it's the same circuit. It's absolutely unbelievable. And that shows you how deep inside you, how basic, how primordial that circuit is in you, that's sizing other people up and looking at where they fit in the hierarchy. Well, with human society, it's more like hierarchies of competence than dominance per se. And like, if your serotonin levels fall, you get depressed, you crunch forward, and the whole, everything around you turns cloudy and black, and then you're inviting more oppression, right? And so you get into this bad loop, you know, and so it's really important to, if you're trying to get your act together, it's really important to stretch yourself out and sit up properly, because it's part of the psychophysiological loop that can start you on the upward curve. And so it's a really important thing to take note of. And like, if you've been bullied, say when you were a kid, maybe you've moved and so it's sort of irrelevant, you're still carrying that with you in the hunched shoulders, and then you can't breathe properly, and your voice isn't right, and you invite more bullying, because the predator types are always looking for people who look like they can be intimidated, and who will make a nice fuss if they are, you know, like a nice gratifying, they'll make nice gratifying sounds of suffering if you torment them, right? Because that's what a bully really wants. And so that's what the first chapter is about. It's about hierarchy, and it's a critique in some sense also of the idea of the patriarchy. You know, because the patriarchy is this dominant, oppressive hierarchy that everyone's embedded in. And, you know, the social constructionist, social justice warrior, postmodernist types think about that as a social construction. It's like, how about no? That's just wrong. Lobsters have hierarchies. That's 1/3 of a billion years ago. Okay, that's not a social construction. It's part of being itself. And if you only see a hierarchy as power and tyranny, then you're looking at the world wrong. Like, it's true that hierarchies can be tyrannical and dominant. And a degenerated hierarchy is nothing but tyranny. But in a functional society, the hierarchy is actually the structure of the society, and you're actually protected within it. Well, then how you relate to that hierarchy is very important, but that's part of personal development. That's part of standing upright, you know. And then people in the hierarchy think, oh, well, you're someone who could do good things for the hierarchy. Let's promote you. Yeah. You know, like, men don't struggle for power. That isn't what men do. Not if they're civilized. They size each other up and elect the competent to lead them. And they do that at every level of society. Like I tell a story in there about, might be later in another chapter, it doesn't matter. I worked in a rail crew in southern Saskatchewan. They're rough guys, like a lot of them had been in prison, you know. And when you first came onto the rail crew, you got a stupid nickname and people teased you. And I remember this one kid called Lunch Bucket. That was his nickname because he came to the rail crew with a lunch bucket that looked like his mom had packed it. That was a bad idea. You bring your damn lunch in kind of a, you know, ratty paper bag. Right. And you don't make too big a thing out of it.
And it's dirty and smelly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like you're not pronouncing your status with your lunch bucket.
You don't have a Barbie lunchbox.
Exactly, yes. So they named him Lunch Bucket, which he wasn't very happy about. Well, that was a mistake. He should have taken it with a smile. And then he was always peevish and irritable. And if you asked him to do something, he'd whine. And so, like, this was soon after I joined the rail crew. Well, soon, there's about 60 men on this crew. It stretched out about a quarter of a mile down the tracks. Soon, anonymous harassers were throwing pebbles at him during work. We had hard hats on, so the game was, let's see if we can hit a lunch bucket in the hard hat with a pebble.
Anonymous.
Yeah, well, because you don't know where it's coming from. And that was purposeful because he couldn't take a joke. It's like, well, let's see if he can take this joke. Clunk, and everybody go, you know. And then he just got more and more peevish, and the pebbles got bigger and bigger. And, you know, a week later, Lunch Bucket was gone, having not learned anything from the experience. But, you know, the men were testing him out. It's like, can you take a joke? Can you be useful? Can you at least be amusing? Like, is there something worthwhile about you? It's like, no. It's like, okay, well then you're out of here because you never know when we actually might need to depend on you.
It's so interesting to me because it fits fully within what you were saying about why it's important for a father to play with a kid, or why my brother and I used to beat the living crap out of each other. He'd win sometimes, I'd win sometimes, but we learned something there. And that's what I think you said, it's like learning how to dance. And it all kind of makes sense. But I like that you started this with something physical, because all of us can do this. Everyone watching this today that's struggling with whatever they're struggling with can just work on that. Even whoever's watching this that has God's best given posture ever can still work on that.
Yeah, so if you happen to be hunched forward, you know, weightlifting is really good for that because you strengthen out your back muscles and it'll pull your shoulders back. And you want that. And it's really important as you get older because you look at old people, you know, and if they're stooped, they start to calcify that way, and then they start to bend down and, like, you know, you don't want to be in that situation when you're 40. You know, maybe you want to be in that, you don't ever, but maybe 90, you know, but not 40, and certainly not 20. And so, you know, you need to do a postural analysis or have someone take a look at you and say, well, you know, yeah, you're kind of hunched forward, and you got to be conscious about it. You got to pull back a lot and open up. It's also kind of I think part of the reason it signifies dominance is because, like, this is a protective crouch, right? And it's to stop animals that jump on your back from getting at your soft part. So it's instinctual. It's protective, right? So this basically says, I'm open to the world, right? But what it also says is I can handle being open to the world. So it signifies competence and confidence.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's also a sort of vulnerable position.
Yeah, definitely.
And in you know, yoga or certain other stretching things, Feldenkrais and things like that, you would work on this. You would also, the mansplaining people will not be happy when they...
No, they're not.
They're going to see us doing this. They're not going to be happy about that.
Yeah, well, the thing about competence is acceptance of vulnerability.
Right.
That's what competence is. That's a deep idea. I mean, the deepest Christian idea, for example, is that you should accept the vulnerability of being. That's the acceptance of the crucifixion, essentially. It's like, you know, you're at the X where all the suffering takes place. You're going to whine about that, you know, and get resentful and bitter about it because there's reason to. Like, let's make no mistake about it. Or you're going to say, bring it on. I can handle it, no matter what it is. Well, maybe you can't do that, but that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming at being able to handle it, no matter what it is, and to do that voluntarily. And the idea is that if you can do that, you will transcend the tragedy. And it's like, well, could that be true? Well, most people admire tough, competent people. So you know it's at least a little bit true. You know, you admire the courageous. So, well, how courageous can you get? That's the question. How courageous can you get? Well, you practice and see.
And it makes you want to be better. I'll tell you, I didn't tell you this 2 weeks ago, but when we did that event, which was spectacular, at the end, when all the kids were coming up to say hi to us, there's a line for the two of us. Your line did have more people. There were plenty on mine too, but I actually felt after, truly, I was like, I have to be better now. This means I have to be better. And I thought, I felt great about it. Like I actually didn't feel jealous of you or whatever. I was like, oh, he brought it. And it's like, I should bring it too. So that competition is a wonderful thing.
It is. Well, the thing is that, and that's the opposite of well, in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel because he can't stand the fact that he's better than him. That's really it. He knows he's better than him. There's no doubt about that. And so Abel's actually his ideal. Because that's what it means to see someone who's better than you. If you get jealous of that, you're getting jealous of your own ideal. Well, that's a very bad idea. It's like what you should do is you should watch and you should think, well, there's something going on there that I haven't quite got. And maybe if I watch, I could figure it out. It's like it's an opportunity,
right.
You know?
It doesn't mean you got to take that guy down and in this case kill him. It means you got to work on your stuff. It's
an opportunity even to do that, you know?
Yeah.
And you also have to remember too that people have their times and, you know, things oscillate, and sometimes you meet someone who's kind of at a pinnacle in their life in some sense and you're not. That doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way. That's the other thing. Is like even very successful people have their, well, they get sick and die. You know, it's like you got to remember that we've got this fundamental limitation that equalizes us in some sense, and that's also very much worth knowing. You know, it's like you don't know when you see someone successful, you don't know the full tragedy of their being, and so there's another chapter in there that's called "Compare Yourself to Who You Were Yesterday and Not to Who Someone Else Is Today."